Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, and by popular demand, we're going to talk about some of the life lessons from coaching youth sports. Dustin, we talk about this a lot. We have collectively about 25-ish years of coaching youth sports, from soccer to basketball, football, golf, and a lot of other things in between. And a lot of experience just in having kids and being around youth sports. It's something we talk about a lot in business and in leadership. And so much of coaching youth sports, we're instilling and we're teaching these life skills that are transferable skills, really, that they can apply to any sport, any hobby, and anything they do in life. And it's a fun topic. So we decided, why not jump in to the 3 biggest lessons learned from each of us, 6 total, that we've found from coaching youth sports. So I'm going to hand the mic back to you, and I'd love to hear some thoughts just in general before you get into your top 3.
Yeah, so as we've talked about for years now, it's interesting on how when you start as a youth sports coach, you do it for a number of different reasons. You know, for a lot of us, it's our kids' team, right? So it's time with the kids, and we want to direct them, and we have a little desire to coach other kids as well, and so we step up. And one of the things I've always shared is it's an interesting process, because when you first start, you think you're there to teach the kids all these things. And when you hang up the whistle, you realize, I think I learned a lot more from them than I probably ever coached them.
Yeah.
And maybe that means I'm a bad coach. I don't know. But it's amazing on how many life lessons you can learn, because in youth sports, it's just so pure, right? Sports already is in many ways, you got scoreboards, you got winners and losers, you got emotion, you got dedication, you got all these different things that exist. But youth sports to me is a whole different level, because you're also going through stages of life with, little humans that, for many of those years are completely unfiltered, right? They're not adults that have years of scar tissue and things they think they're supposed to behave a certain way and all that. And so you're able just to find some unique situations. And, obviously they don't realize they're creating these situations most of the time. But, to me, that was the most amazing thing, is all the things, I know we kind of challenge ourselves to each pick 3 today. But, as we talked about, before the show, we have such long lists we could pull from. But I think it was a good challenge to kind of pick a couple of pieces.
But before we get in the top 3, I would love to hear why, though. What is your why with coaching youth sports? Because to me, I've got one that I'll go into, and I think it's important on this subject. And it's not just because you have kids, I'm sure.
Yeah. So my why for coaching was a little bit unique. So first, my family has a strong coaching background. My grandfather, who started McClone Insurance, he really was a teacher and a coach. That was really his background. So from multiple generations, my father, uncles, lots of different family members have coached through the years. So it's always been around me for sure. But ultimately, the initial motivation for me to coach was much simpler than that. So my son was going into 3rd grade, and I was very dedicated to my career and our business, and really trying to build my career, build our business, really to try to build a legacy. And I all of a sudden realized I wasn't really spending much time at all at home. And my son all of a sudden was entering 3rd grade. Hoops is a very big thing in us and our family. We follow the teams, and we're very passionate about it. Both my wife and I both coached youth basketball. And all of a sudden I realized I wasn't spending enough time with them. And so it was this kind of light bulb moment where all of a sudden you're looking at saying, something has to give. Otherwise, all of a sudden my kid's going to be growing up and I haven't been a part of it. So what can I do to take a more active role? And so it was literally kind of at a snap of a finger. I said, you know what, I'm going to coach him hoops. And so I literally coached him from then all the way through 8th grade. And, I was actually at one of his games last night. He's now in high school. And I was maybe yapping at him a little bit from the sidelines. And my wife had to remind me, you're not his coach anymore. And I'm like, you know what? I'm always going to be his coach.
That's right. I think that's cool. And I think whether you're you or you're me, I played a little bit growing up. That is basketball. I almost played no soccer, but yet I knew that because I had extensive coaching experience in my 20s from volunteering at different camps and stuff, I knew that I could make an impact. And for me, that was probably the most important thing is I saw firsthand as a young adult and as a teenager, the impact you could make. And you could see those eyes light up and you could say, wow, that's so cool. Or this is exciting. And something goes from being dreadful to being fun. So you can see the joy on a child's face going from, I don't want to be here today, just this dreadful look, dreadful response, to an hour or 2 sessions later, they light up. They're excited to be there. They're excited to be with their friends because not only are they learning something, but they're getting better. And a lot of what I've always tried to do is teach life skills that are transferable. And I think that sports in general can teach you that, especially with the right coach. And you can see these young kids and these young adults transform. And it's really fun for me when I was coaching high school football, not high school, middle school football from 6th through 8th grade. You could see these kids grow. You could see the skill set and then blossom into a starting defensive lineman or starting quarterback. And that's just like, that's really cool. I was a part of that. Like I played a small role in seeing this young student athlete turn into a, Division III football player or even a starting high school volleyball player, soccer player, whatever it might be. And so that was a big reason for me. I've also seen in my years of coaching a lot of great coaches. And unfortunately, I've seen some that were just in it for their kids and seen parents meddle in kind of the politics of trying to get playing time. And I always said that if I had kids, regardless of any sport they're in, I'm going to try to get involved in some capacity to make sure that those things don't happen. Obviously, I think the best kids should play, the ones that have the best attitude. But outside of that, I said, not only can I make sure that some of these negative things don't happen, but I can help teach some of these really important life skills that these young girls and young boys can go on and they can instill into other activities, sports, and more importantly, grow up to be great adults that give back in society.
Yeah, it's excellent.
So let's jump into our top 3. Dustin, kick it off.
Yeah. So the first one I wanted to talk about was about energy matters. And, you can call that passion. You can call it energy. One of the things that I'll never forget my first tournament coaching 3rd grade boys basketball. And you lose your voice after 3 games probably after 1 game, because literally you're yelling the same thing over and over and over again. It's who do you got?
As loud as you can.
Right. Right. Like, and it's get back. I mean, those are basically the only 2 things, because at that point they don't even necessarily know if they're on offense or defense. But what you realize is that even as that carries on, I believe when you get to higher levels, right? If you see a lot of NBA coaches and stuff, they're not high energy necessarily on the sideline, right? Like by that point, these professional athletes, right? Like they have a lot of their own internal energy. They can create energy from each other, and they have obviously a lot of passion and things like that. But one of the things I've seen with a lot of youth sports is you got kids that have varying different levels of passion and different levels of energy. And I think it's really hard to kind of skip past that. I'll give you if you look at, just the sidelines of different youth sports, there's not too many that are highly successful where the coach is not super energetic and passionate. Now that still can look different, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're jumping or whatever, jumping up and down or sprinting down the court. but they're hyper engaged, and you realize that you have to lift people up. And when I think about like the different businesses and organizations that I've been involved in, to me as a leader, it's so often that's something you overlook. You overlook the value you can bring through just energy and passion. I think a lot of times we think it's got to be strategy, or it's got to be this, or it's got to be that. A lot of times it's just bringing the heat, bringing the energy, showing them how passionate you are about what we're really trying to achieve. And it can't be fake. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be real. But to me, that was one that I probably got a lot better by coaching youth sports, about bringing that energy and being able to transfer it to others.
I love that. I think back when I was coaching 5U and 8U soccer, and at a certain point I stopped coaching soccer because I have very little experience playing the sport. But I remember being the loudest coach of all the teams we'd play and all the people in our school district. And I thought at a certain point that maybe I need to tone it back a little bit. But I got excited. I was really passionate. I'm very authentic about seeing my team win. I love it when one of the girls was hustling down, dribbling the ball, and then kind of while simultaneously getting bumped by the other girl, she fought it off. She powered through it. And I'm like, yeah, great hustle, great hustle. And I thought, okay, Chris, you're not coaching the boys here. This isn't like seventh grade football anymore. We're not trying to tackle people. And then one of the dads came over after, and he's like, I really love your energy. He's like, that's exactly what my daughter needs. She needs someone to pump them up, and they get excited about that. And then all the girls are cheering. Even if the girl didn't score the goal, it's fun to see that young girl power through that adversity and getting bumped, and then basically driving the whole field to get there. And I think that's so important because, like you said, in the professional sports, those adults can create their own energy. They know they need that, but the kids, most of them have a hard time with that. And so I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of coaches that are more or less passive than not. And so I love exerting that energy because I think it is contagious, just like hustle is. And we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
What's
All right,
number
so
two?
Number two, leaders emerge. So I feel like a lot of time, what I saw in a variety of different youth sports teams, I think a lot of times people in life want to appoint leaders, right? You're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader. And what's interesting in youth sports is kids don't care, right? Like you have to, even as a coach, especially in today's environment, which maybe is a good thing or a bad thing, like you have to earn leadership. And, as you look at a lot of these different kids, it's not always the best player that is the leader, right? Sometimes the best players, candidly, are the worst leaders. Maybe they have a bad attitude. Maybe they're just not a good leader, right? They might be a good player. They might be a good teammate, but they're just not a leader. And what I saw, which I thought was really interesting, and not only kind of letting them emerge, but then feeding into that, is recognizing that sometimes your leaders may not be the best at a specific task. So as an example, your best shooter may not be the best leader, or maybe is a best leader, but maybe not the most vocal leader. And there's all different variations of what leadership is and isn't. And so to me, as I look, and sometimes it shows up in places you didn't anticipate. And I see that in youth sports, and then I also see it in business, where I think a lot of times people are just looking for that put me in coach moment, right? And again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's shooting the winning basket, right? It can be all sorts of different things. But sometimes you'll see that leader emerge in a way that they can play a role in that winning team that maybe previously you just hadn't thought of. Because in life and in business or sports or whatever, we tend to initially view that we're going to find the leaders in the most skilled people. They're the best at this thing, so they're going to be the leader. That's why so often in business, like we over promote people, right? We have somebody that's really, really good at this. Tell you what, you're a leader now. It's like, well, wait a second, but they're not a leader. Like that's not their skill set. They're amazing at what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're they're the right leader. There might be somebody that actually is pretty good, but is has amazing leadership qualities and candidly people follow.
Yeah, I like that. I think that that's true when you look at skill development. A lot of times, those players who get better week over week, month over month, and it might take a season, it might take several seasons, as they develop the skill, they develop confidence. And when they develop confidence, typically they become a better leader. May not
Absolutely.
be the best leader or the top leader, but they become a
Yep.
leader. And you can never have enough leaders on a team.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
What do you have for number
So,
3?
Number 3, setting expectations up front. So I have a story on this one. So the other gentleman that I coached with, Ben, if you're listening, this is a shout out to you. So the first practice, this was 3rd grade, and admittedly, I like to win. Probably even more so, I hate to lose. But for me, I believe in the power of winning. I don't believe in just showing up. I think everyone can be competing and trying to win. People want to be part of winning teams. And so in this situation, he was the head coach. This is in 3rd grade, and I was the assistant coach. And frankly, we didn't know each other at all. So we're there at the first practice. We got all the kids sitting around. And, all I'm looking for is like, okay, let's get going. Let's get these young boys working hard, learning how to challenge themselves, looking how to grow and going out and competing. And he starts out by getting all the kids around and says, okay, so before we start our first practice, why are we here? Like, what's the goal we're here? And everybody's asking, well, to play basketball, well, to be with friends, or, well, to be part of a team, things like that. And then finally, after some prodding, one of the kids says, well, we're here to have fun. And he jumps right on that. And he's like, yep, absolutely. We are absolutely here to have fun. And at this point, I have to admit, there was I was dying inside, because I was predicting that, okay, we're there to have fun was going to be, well, we're just going to have sunshine and rainbows in practice. And, if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. No big deal. Let's just sit around and, sing Kumbaya. And so that's where my head was going. And obviously that was his setup. And he's like, yep, we are here to win. And then he followed up with the best question. He's like, okay, so let me ask you all, do you think it's more fun to win or to lose? And of course, all the kids are like, well, yeah, of course it's more fun to win. He's like, exactly right. So just so we're clear, we absolutely are here to have fun. And our focus is going to be having fun on Saturdays, which Saturdays is when we played all of our tournaments. So our goal is we're going to have fun on Saturdays because it's more fun to win. But that doesn't mean practice is necessarily going to be fun. We're going to do the hard stuff. We're going to challenge you. We're going to push you. Get out of your comfort zone, because we need to do those things so that we have fun on Saturday. And it was, it's like one of those things where I was like, yes, thank you. We finally, we got there. But to me, what was interesting is, so that was in 3rd grade. We actually, years later, we were talking about his parents, and I brought that story up, which to him, I don't even know that he recognized the impact. There's actually another parent in the stands listening to this who she remembered it vividly as well, because her mind was going through the same thing. But literally that was a tone that was set, because we coached all the way through 8th grade. That was a tone that was set all the way through 8th grade. And, to me, when you think about what was the value of that, that helped for parents, that helped for kids, that helped for everything. So when anytime somebody came back and said, well, this just isn't fun anymore, it's like, okay, well, what isn't fun, right? And again, it wasn't like we were meant for practice to be miserable or anything like that. I'm not trying to paint that picture, but it was, yes, we're here to work. We're here to get better, because it's miserable to lose all day on Saturday, right? So to me, that setting expectations early to kind of set the tone that you can, and then reinforcing it, of course, to me was so significant. And in business, it's the same thing, right? Just being able to set expectations of, okay, well, what are we here to do? I think a lot of times corporate cultures are, for lack of a better way of saying it, they feel like they need to be fluffy and nice and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, yes, there's some of that, but at the end of the day, we have a job to do, right? And every business doesn't exist unless you have a customer. So we need to be viewing internally, and I'm a big culture guy and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's times where we just got to go do the work.
Yeah. I really like that one, because when we talk about expectations, That's kind of a loose thing that gets thrown around a lot. But I always say setting and tempering expectations, because if you come from a program or a school like yours or even like mine, um, it is expected that you win. And even though that's not a reality, the assumption is, well, we're just going to show up, and because we are X school, we're going to win most of our games. And I think tempering those expectations is always good, much like you're doing. But you have to let people know that sometimes, and I say this a lot to my oldest, who's a high school football player, is it's good to get your ass kicked every once in a while.
Yeah.
I actually think
Yes.
it's healthy,
Yes.
because if you come from a program, we'll just call it like statewide or kind of countrywide football program like Kimberly High School is, the expectation is you're just going to come, you're not only going to win, but you're going to destroy teams and you're going to go to state every year. Um, you should show up every once in a while, get punched in the mouth. And when you do that, people are coming for you. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, I've always learned more from those losses. And so I think just tempering it, saying that's not how it's going to be every week.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So you're up.
All right. So I feel like some of these are a bit elementary. And while I've learned these in my young life, I'm often reminded of these even today. And so one of them for me is address issues immediately, whether that be with your team, with the parents of the teammates, because I've had situations in the not so recent past where I've had multiple players on a team, and we're talking about young girls, first, second, third grade, who show up and they are only there because their parents signed them up, and they'd be very vocal about telling you, look, I'm not that interested in being here, I don't even really like this sport. And so what happens when they don't want to be there is you tend to have some behavioral issues. And we're not talking about things that are malicious. We're just talking about distractions, listening, putting forth the effort. Because as you know, when you have players, 5 players on a court or 5 players on a soccer field, and one of them isn't putting forth, just say, their best effort or even close to that, a play is going to break down. It's not going to work. And so if you have this pattern of not working, that brings the morale down, and other players are like, come on, like we're so close here. Why can't we just score a goal? Why can't we just get this basket? Why do we keep losing? And so when you get 2 or 3 of those players together who become this nucleus of distractions, we'll call it, to be nice, that can really, over weeks, cause a team to kind of spin in the opposite direction from where you're intending to go. And so I think it's really important that a lot of the things you said, like setting expectations, but also when you have those issues, address them immediately with your team, with the players, probably individually if you can, and then with the parents, and let them know that there may be some ramifications. And it's not always easy, because if you take a player that doesn't want to be there and you sit them out, that's kind of what they want. And so it's very challenging, but I think if you can very swiftly communicate, hey, here's just the general issue that I'm dealing with, I'm just asking for help. Boy, does that make life easier. And of course, in the world of business, it's so much easier when you just have a conversation about an issue that's happening, because you might find that maybe it's not as big of an issue as you thought.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to me, as the idea of addressing those issues early is so critical, because I think a lot of times people believe that the person that's doing the thing is doing it for a certain reason. I was with a group of our team just yesterday, actually, and talked about perspective, and I thought this was a great example of, if you're in a hurry and you're driving around, and so you cut somebody off, it's justified because you're in a hurry, right? You're running late. When you're not late and somebody else cuts you off, they're a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's because you lack that perspective, right? We don't look at it from someone else's perspective. And I think, that identification of early, one, allows you to address the issues as they are, but also allows you to gain insight as to potentially what's driving that behavior or whatever to address it. Because 9 times out of 10, people don't, that I've seen at least, people don't want to be the one doing adverse behavior, right? Like
Right.
they want to contribute positively, but there's something else kind of driving that. And so, yes, I agree. The earlier you can address it, create a conversation, because otherwise tensions rise really quickly. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, both parties are like, I feel like you're treating me wrong. Well, I feel like you're treating me wrong. And all of a sudden, it's just so elevated, you can't even be productive anymore. And so, how do you
Yeah.
have that conversation early with an understanding that, look, we're both probably trying to do positive things here, but what's going on?
Yeah. I recall an issue where, and it wasn't so much an issue as it was something that I observed. Excuse me. So I had a young girl coming to practice, and she would often sit to the side and she didn't want to participate. Well, in the beginning, it was because she was just nervous. She didn't know a lot of people. She was brand new to the sport. And she just needed someone to say, like, look, it's okay. Like, most of us don't know everyone else either. And then the pattern kind of happened over and over a couple times. And I said, is there anything else going on? Like, you have a bad day? Did something happen? You want to talk about it? And then she said, yeah, she nodded her head. I do want to talk about it. And I was like, oh, well, this is excellent, right?
Yeah.
And it found out that there were other things going on with school, that some things that were not fair. People were being unkind to her. And it took a little convincing from my daughters to say, hey, look, there's this girl, it's kind of going through some tough times. Would you be willing to just kind of befriend her? I know you don't know her. And next thing you know, we transition about 4 weeks in, 3 weeks in. There's no more tears. There's no more hesitation to come to practice. It is coming to practice with a smile on her face because you're seeing your new best friends. And so, unfortunately, it can take some weeks, and it required a couple conversations with parents to try to get some more information. And then a lot of it was just really letting this person know that, look, we really want you on our team. We're really happy to have you here. You're a great teammate. You're great to coach. And it took some work, but we got her to love the sport and love her team. And so it's different from the first issue I mentioned where you have behavioral and engagement stuff. But I think if you can nip that in the butt right away, you certainly have a recipe for success.
Love it. Next up.
Control your emotions. Now, this is something that I learned, and frankly, I wrote a book about many years ago, but I think it's important for the young student athletes to learn. And again, boy, girl, football, basketball, soccer, whatever, golf. This is one that is important throughout your entire life. And through coaching youth basketball, which I'm doing right now, I often remind my kids that, you are responsible for yourself. And ultimately, you can only control what you can control. So when I've got a kid coming off the court, that's my kid. I try not to single out my kids, but you can't help but your eyes go to your kids more than the other kids. And so I'm trying to talk to my daughter and say, what is going on? What are you so mad about? And she won't tell me. And I said, look, as your dad, I can't help you if you can't tell me what the problem is. There's nothing I can do about it. And there's nothing I can say. And it just is, this other girl is frustrating me, right? And she's poking me, or she's saying things, or this girl landed on me. I get it, third grade. It's hard to process that. This is the first time we're
Mhm.
playing any level of competitive basketball. And it struck me that at some point at halftime, I needed to let the girls know that we're playing a team that's very physical and a team that has a big size advantage on us. And I had to say, like, look, I can tell that a lot of us are frustrated, dejected. We just came off of losing 2 consecutive games, and now we're losing in our third game. But the thing that we can't do is we can't get ourselves thrown out of a game. We can't get a foul because of our behavior. And so if there's a problem that we're having with the other team, first we need to talk about it. You need to tell us what the problem is so that we can talk to the refs or potentially the other team and say, look, this isn't right. But you need to control your emotions. Take a deep breath, because the last thing we want to do is push back or say something that we wish we wouldn't have said. And it's not easy to do. It's easy for me to say to control your emotions, just like we can do in the office at work. But we can only control what we can control, which is ourselves. And I often say this, I know this is a really hard message for kids, even teenagers to get, but you are 100% in control of your body and your emotions. Outside of restless leg
Yes.
syndrome, you are in control.
Right. Be the calm in the eye of the storm is often a way I think about this, right? If you think about, if we look at it in business, I think there's such a need to be calm when the world around you is not. And when you think about leadership and you think about business success, it's those that can kind of level out the highs and the lows to really keep that kind of emotional stability. What's interesting to me about how I kind of see that in youth sports, sports is interesting because when the kid on your team, when they're emotional high or low, right? Like in the heat of the game. I'll give you a great example. This was literally last week. So my son now plays high school hoops, and my wife and I are both former coaches, right? So we're in this kind of relatively quiet gym, and my son kind of goes up like for a kind of a fight for a rebound, right? And this kid's taller and bigger than he is. And so they're kind of fighting for the rebound, and then the kid kind of rips it apart from him, right? And passes it up. Well, so now you can tell he's fired up, right? Like he's frustrated and kind of fired up, like, oh, I could have got that. And so they're doing a press, and the guy's coming down the court. And so our son, what does he start doing? Right? He starts like riding him, right? Like from behind, like got his chest right to his side. And so we just know here comes the foul, right? Like it's 101, right? Like he's emotional. Here comes foul. And so both my wife and I scream at completely involuntarily, by the way, and no, stop. Like, and the whole gym, of course, then looks at us because we're like, oh crap, I guess we're the loudest ones in the gym. And literally, so like for a second, he kind of pulls off, but then he goes, right back at it, and he gets a foul 4 seconds later. Right. But it was one of those things where that was the exact point, is totally understand where he was coming from. Right. And in a lot of ways in sports, like there are outlets where you can apply it in a good way, right? Like you're ticked off. Well, go apply it on defense, right? Or go apply it in aggressiveness in that next play. The challenge is, though, even when applied seemingly in the right direction, you still got to understand how to control it, because, basically he was too hyped up and then ended up getting a foul, which, then I think that was his third foul actually. And so they got to get pulled out of the game. So, I totally agree that idea of, controlling your emotions, because if you can't, it can have a real negative impact. Channeling them, though, I think is super powerful as well, right? And those that can channel them in the right way through control and using them in the right direction, then it's a game changer.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you have a high level of passion and hustle, like we do, and probably like our kids do, I tell my daughters, I'm like, it's okay to have some fouls. I don't mind that. And I'll often remind them, especially they get in some foul trouble, it's okay. I would rather have you get a foul than play so loose and so soft that you're giving up baskets. And ultimately, by playing at that level, you're going to frustrate the other person, maybe the ball handler, more than they're going to frustrate you. And so I think you have to keep that high, but like you said, channeled and controlled is really important. So I tend to get myself a little too high at times because I'm passionate. I'm so excited about the 3 baskets we scored in one game that I hope that rubs off on the other kids. But we'll transition to number 3, and then I may or may not have a bonus one at the end. And my third one is team, and it's an acronym for Together Everyone Achieves More. And the thing that I try to instill when I'm coaching, specifically in basketball, it's definitely true in team sports where there's more than 4 or 5 people on a court or on a field, is if one person on an offensive play or even a defensive play doesn't know or doesn't execute on their assignment, it is highly probable that play is not going to work. And we see this in basketball on an inbound play. We have something drawn up where everyone kind of creates this square around the paint, and then the 2 individuals at the bottom go screen for the ones at the top, and the 2 at the top come down, and hopefully they're open. And it's something we practice over and over and over. But if for any reason one of them gets distracted, and little kids get distracted at times, or they're 3 seconds late, that play may all be for nothing. And so I try to remind them that we are a team, and together, if we all do the job and the assignment together, and that may even mean the boys and girls on the sideline who are cheering for their team, right? When we're
Mhm.
down by 6 points, hey, it's really helpful if you're cheering for us, because those girls or those boys are running their butts off up and down the court, hustling to keep us in the game. And so I really think that whether you're a leader, whether you're a janitor, whether you're a receptionist, salesperson, whoever, um, a company needs everybody to be successful, to do their job and do their job the best. And it's just a good reminder for everyone, young and old, that together everyone achieves more.
Couldn't agree more. And I think what's interesting about it is how it changes in different situations. So, I think a lot of teams, sports teams, right? They have those certain players that, maybe they're the best scorers, maybe they're the best defender, whatever. They have those skill sets, but inherently adversity strikes or a different situation presents itself where suddenly someone that maybe historically didn't play a significant role, right? They still played a role, but didn't play as significant role. All of a sudden, you need them at a time when it matters most,
Mhm.
right? I'm sure you have a ton of these stories as well, where we would have someone that all of a sudden somebody twisted their ankles, somebody got in foul trouble. Uh, Maybe it was just somebody had a certain skill set, whether they were tall, whether they were long, whether they were just uh, really good at one type of shot or whatever. Infusing those people in certain times where that they might only have an impact on 4 plays in a 6-game tournament, but those 4 really, really matter.
Yeah.
And to me, you could talk about even the bench. Uh, It's another big thing, right? Sometimes it's just the energy. Sometimes it's the kid pulling maybe the star player aside, be like, "Look, you got this." Like, they're in
Mhm.
their head or whatever, and just calming them down. And uh, I think when I look at it for business, it's interesting because not only as your own team, but we've even talked about it with Hustle about there's also so many people in the world that can help you get better. And so when you expand it outside of sports, it's who really is my team and who are the people that I'm surrounding myself with to continue to challenge myself, because if I can pull a little bit from all of them, I tell you what, everybody does better in the long run.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that there's one more that I want to throw out there that's really important. That is
Is this the
really
bonus
good.
one?
Yeah, to teach kids. I really believe kids should know that it's not fair. And if you happen to be growing up with above average means in your life, that's probably something you're not going to see or be exposed to until probably your teenage years. But I'll give you an example. And I've always told my players, told my kids, and try to say this in the stands when I'm watching my kids if I'm not coaching, is that, life isn't always fair. And the refs will not always get it right. They're human. I'm shocked how many plays they actually get, because I can't see half the stuff that they see. And so I never ever want to blame the outcome on a ref. I try so hard, even as a fan watching my favorite team like the Packers, I try not to. Obviously, it seems like the mess ups happen more at the end of the game, like they did recently. But, you know, I'll give you a story. And I don't want to call out a school or team or a ref, but we're in a situation where we're at a school. My assistant coach has never coached basketball before. Awesome guy. He asks the ref a question. And so, very honest, simple question. When you get to basketball, you sit on one side of the court and then you warm up on the opposite side of the court, right? This is just kind of something you'll observe. Now, my assistant coach, he had seen it before, but didn't know that it was an actual rule, just thought that maybe it was something that happened. And then so he says to him in a very polite way, you want us to move? Why? And he's like, well, that's the rule. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I've never heard that rule before. Where'd that come from? He's like, oh, it's just a rule. It's been in the rule book forever. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that was an actual rule. That's a thing, huh? And he's like, if you want to challenge me one more time, you're out of here. And he's like, I was asking to gather information because I'm new to coaching basketball. I'd never heard it before, and I was just getting clarity. So already we could tell this guy may not have been having a very good day. And then as we go on to continue the game, there are a lot of very questionable calls, and not just against my team, but against the other team as well. And I looked over at the other coach and I'm like this, and he looks at me like he's confirming, yes, that was a bad call. And so we had a couple of injuries where kids, get hit in the head with a ball or someone falls and they kind of skin their knee. So there were probably 4 or 5 situations in the first half where these kids were coming out and I just would pull out. I'm like, here, get off the court because the team is on the opposite side of the court and you're like holding your arm, walking away. And I just grab someone off the bench and say, hey, you get in there and get after it. Right. And so the ref sees that I've done this a few times and he's like, hey, we have to stop the game for that. And I said, I know, but this little girl is not even engaged on the right side of the court. She's walking off and while the other team is shooting. And he's like, well, you got to let me know. Okay. So I approached the ref again because there's a player who's elbowing viciously, maybe not maliciously, but just aggressively elbowing other people on the court, my team. And I said to the ref, I'm like, hey, I just want to point this out to you. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's happened now at least 3 occasions where my kids are getting hurt. And again, not mad. This is youth sports. It's just kind of part of the game.
Yep.
And he says, yeah, we'll look for it. So happens again. I said to the ref, I'm like, hey, I warned you about this. You going to call a foul? You going to do something? And he's like, you need to back up. Okay. So another girl gets injured. I'm like, ref, I got a kid that's hurt. I need to sub. And he allows the other team to continue shooting on their side of the court. So I just pulled her off. And he's like, you can't do that. I said, well, you said you'd stop the game and you didn't. And so a couple more, we'll call them bad calls happen. And the other ref, or the other coach was told to sit down and the ref nearly kicked this guy out of the game. And even the people running the scoreboard were like, okay, calm down. It's going to be okay. And I went over to the coach and I just said to him, like, shake your hand. I'm like, I get it. It's going both ways. And he's like, this is the worst I've ever seen. After the game, I talked to the girls and I said, look, I understand a lot of you were very frustrated with how the game went. I said, but at the end of the day, you're going to find that unfortunately life's not fair. There's going to be games where we're going to have calls that seem like they go for us. There's going to be some where it feels like a lot of them go against us. And there's going to be some where it seems really fair, right? And unfortunately, in basketball and in many sports, you have to nod your head and say, okay, because these are people being paid and they're doing the best they can. But ultimately, there's going to be things that seem like they should go away and they don't. But even if 2 or 3 of those calls were changed, it doesn't change the outcome of the game. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to look at it and say, you know what, next time we're going to go out there and we're going to do better. We're not going to be playing that same team every time. We're not going to get those 2 refs the other time. Life isn't always fair. But if we go back to some of the life lessons we talked about, like controlling our emotions, working together as a team, having fun. And I addressed some of the issues I thought were happening in that game. And I tried to do those with the controlled emotions. And it didn't change the outcome. And that's okay. What we did, though, was we learned. We've seen the opposite end of the spectrum. We've had games where we had a lot of calls that went for us, right, wrong, or indifferent. And we had one now on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I think it's great for the young kids to see that, hey, life's not fair. And all we can do is get better from that. We can avoid some of those issues and those calls and those plays. And let's use that to just improve day over day moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, fair is interesting because fair is a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
right? And so, part of the reason people often feel things aren't fair is because they lack perspective. And sometimes things just aren't right? They just aren't fair, right? And that's life. It could be politics, it could be a bad situation, it could be whatever. But I think you're exactly right. I think, the mindset of one of the things I've seen is that in the long run, things tend to work themselves out. Unfairness to me
Yeah.
tends to be more short term. And I think sometimes it's lack of perspective. Sometimes it's just, it is what it is. I look at it as uh, playing time is another thing that, often comes up in youth sports. Right. And, I'll call it playing time in sports. I'll call it, promotions in business. And it's the same thing, right? People get upset like, well, how come this person got promoted, or how come this person got this job, or how come this guy, got in a few more minutes than I did, or went in first, or whatever. Well, in some cases, it may just be the wrong decision, right? In other cases, maybe you lack perspective, right? Maybe, maybe the coach saw something that you didn't see, right? Or maybe the ref saw something that you didn't see, or maybe the boss didn't see something, saw something that you didn't see, or whatever. And so to me, I think I completely agree. This mindset of, life is not fair, but with almost a lens of start with perspective, right? Anytime you find yourself, because it's a cancer, right? When people say, well, that's not, literally there's a successful businessman here in the area that he has a rule in his family, like, there's one thing you will never say, and that's not fair, because to him that's 10 times worse than any cuss word you could possibly say. That's not fair is the cancer. That's the root of all evil in many ways.
I should start telling my kids that. That's awesome. I like perspective, and I like the way you said that, because it reminds me, which I say this a lot especially if you watch NFL, right? At the end of a game, it's not uncommon. You'll see a team that's down by a touchdown try to throw a Hail Mary, and then it seems like there's a pass interference call. And then you'll often hear on social media the next day, well, the refs ruined it, right? One bad call, and we weren't able to win the game. Well, you can't put it all on that one call, and I'll tell you why, is because there was likely a couple of missed blocks. There's probably a couple of missed passes, or maybe some bad play calling, because it's not all the players, it's the coaching too. And so if you just zoom out and you take away that one bad call that you think ruined the game or caused you to lose the game, there's a lot of things you could have changed, and you could have changed early in the game. Like when you saw on that first drive that, hey, in the first quarter, we were constantly being screened, and that caused the other players to be open for open shots. Or, they were playing the run better on defense in the first quarter. Well, then make adjustments, right? So I don't think you can call it a bad game, or you can blame losing on 2 or 3 bad calls in a game. That perspective is wrong. And so I think you have to look at it through the lens of, were there other things we could have changed? Were there other things we could have done better? And I mean, if you zoom out even further, preparation. Did we prepare properly for this game, or for this season, or whatever the case might be? And so perspective is huge. That is something that's very hard to teach kids. Tell them what perspective is. It's like hustle. They're like, I thought I was.
Yeah, right. Exactly right.
Any final thoughts on lessons through coaching?
To me, this has been a lot of fun. As you said, and we talked about prior, there's almost infinite lessons to be learned. But to me, what I think has been really interesting about not just this episode, but just as we've talked about hustle over the last number of years, and tying these things together, I found that when you look at youth sports and you kind of have that lens of what can I learn from it, it's amazing on how much you can apply to other things in your life. And, so to me, that's been kind of the most revealing thing. It's just, even when I go to youth sports games now, even as a non-coach, to me, I almost have that lens of, what am I seeing, and what can I learn that really I can apply to many other facets of life.
Yeah, you made a really interesting comment in the beginning about, I think I learned more than the kids did. I've always believed that those who teach or coach must never cease to learn. But ultimately, the more of that you do, the better at it you'll get. So if you're like, hey, I want to get really good at this, well, teach someone else how to do that, and you're going to improve even more. And that's what's fun to me is if I'm going to do something, I want to be good at it. And the more you get involved, from the day I started coaching basketball or soccer, I learned so much more, and I developed a new profound appreciation, not only for those sports, but also for the coaches that are attempting to teach these kids. Because if you've ever taught or coached youth in any capacity, you will have a new profound appreciation, not only for the coaches, but also for the referees, because it's not easy. And I will say, after games, I always go around to thank the referees in whatever sport it might be if I'm coaching, because they don't get paid a lot of money. And there's always a couple parents who yell something stupid. And, there is a shortage of referees these days. It's a thankless job. But even with a couple of questionable calls, most of them are pretty darn good at what they do.
For sure.
And I will say this as just a final thought. I've been teaching all of our kids after the game to go around and give a high five or give knuckles to the refs, because I think, again, at the end of the day, we're in control. We're in control. So it's up to us to make a shot, not make a shot, to do all the little things to help our team win the game. And so, like it or not, if you think a ref was too tough on you, you still go around and say thank you. And
Exactly
I think that is maybe one of the best lessons we can teach kids about just attitude and mindset at the end of the day.
Completely agree.
And a good reminder for us, because life isn't fair. All right. So for all you coaches out there, all you listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found some value in today's podcast. If you would, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever. We appreciate your ears. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.